There are moments in life that divide your story in two, before and after. I never expected one of those moments to find me in the most sacred place I knew, nor did I imagine that everything I believed would begin to unravel in an instant. My name is Omar. This is not a story of abandoning my faith. It's not about changing religions or rebelling against my roots. It's about encountering someone I never expected to meet. If you've ever prayed and only heard silence, if you've followed all the rules yet still felt hollow inside, I want you to stay with me. What I'm about to share is raw, real, and born from a pain so deep it almost consumed me, but also from a love so powerful it rebuilt everything. This story might disturb you, inspire you, maybe both, but I share it not to convince, only to testify, to show that sometimes the thing we fear the most is the very thing that saves us. I was born into a family that breathed faith like oxygen. In our home, belief wasn't optional. It was embedded in every word we spoke, every action we took, every ritual we performed. My earliest memories are of the adhan at dawn, echoing through the alleyways of our neighborhood in Lahore, Pakistan. My father, a revered imam, would rise before the sun to perform ablution, and I'd hear the water splash against the marble floor as I pretended to sleep, watching him through the slit in my eyelids. He was a man of immense discipline and dignity, and from my youngest years I longed to make him proud. Our walls were adorned with verses from the Quran. Every room echoed with recitations. Faith wasn't just a private matter, it was the air we breathed, the song we lived by. From the moment I could speak, I was being prepared for something greater, something holy. I was the firstborn son, and with that came not only responsibility, but expectation. By age 5, I could recite short surahs fluently. By age 7, I was memorizing full chapters. My uncles, both Islamic scholars, would sit with me in the courtyard after Fajr prayer, correcting my tajweed with patient firmness. I didn't resist it. I loved it, or at least I believed I did. Faith was equated with approval. Recitation was rewarded with praise, and every time I saw the pride in my father's eyes, I told myself, this is who I am. The boy who prays, the boy who obeys, the boy who leads. As I grew older, I was recognized in our community. Elders would invite me to recite at weddings, funerals, and mosque gatherings. Some even whispered that I would become a hafiz before I turned 13. I lived for those whispers. Every word of affirmation became a brick in the identity I was building, a structure I dared not question. I was respected, admired, even envied by other boys who couldn't pronounce Arabic with the same clarity or remember verses with the same ease. But behind all the reverence and admiration, something darker was taking root, a growing dissonance between what I performed and what I actually felt. I didn't know it then, but I was becoming an expert at pretending. It began subtly, a quiet emptiness after prayers, a silence that didn't comfort, but unsettled. I did everything right. I followed every rule, every routine, every regulation, but I started to notice that others seemed to draw something from their prayers that I could not. A sense of peace, a feeling of presence. I copied their gestures, their tone, their posture, hoping to tap into the same connection they described. But for me, it was just repetition. Words on a page, movements in sequence. I told myself it was a phase, that I needed more discipline, that if I just tried harder, the feeling would follow. So I did. I intensified my devotion. I added extra rakats, fasted even when it wasn't required, stayed up late memorizing and reciting, trying to drown the hollowness with more effort. But the more I did, the deeper the silence grew. The more people praised me, the more fraudulent I felt. It wasn't rebellion. I didn't want to leave Islam. I wanted to feel it, to know it, to connect with the divine in a way that wasn't mechanical. I envied those who closed their eyes during prayer and emerged glowing. I couldn't understand why the God I was doing everything to please remained so distant, but I couldn't voice these doubts. In my world, questions were dangerous. They weren't seen as part of faith. They were seen as a tax on it. Doubt meant weakness. Weakness meant shame. And shame meant punishment. So I smiled harder, performed better, memorized longer. I wore my obedience like armor, convincing myself that if I just became more devout, everything would fall into place. I buried my questions beneath layers of performance, convincing even myself that they weren't real. Looking back, I now understand what was happening. I was drowning in expectation, suffocated by a belief system I couldn't question and yet couldn't feel. I was applauded for my outer devotion, but inside I was unraveling. Every accolade felt like a lie, every praise a prison, and yet I had no choice but to keep going. To question was to risk everything, my family, my home, my identity. So I stayed silent, perfect on the outside, crumbling on the inside, and the silence of God became the loudest sound in my soul. I still remember the night I first dared to whisper the question in my mind. I was 16. I had just led evening prayer at the mosque, the room filled with people who closed their eyes as I recited, their faces radiant with what I could only assume was the presence of God. But as I stepped outside into the still air, something cracked inside me. I looked up at the stars and quietly asked, "Are you there?" It was the most terrifying thing I'd ever done, not because I was questioning God's existence, but because I was admitting that I couldn't feel Him. That night I sat alone on the rooftop of our house, the city humming in the distance, and for the first time, I allowed myself to cry. Not tears of guilt, but of longing. A longing to be seen, to be known, to be heard. But all that answered me was silence. In the days that followed, I doubled down on devotion again. I felt shame for even daring to question, so I overcompensated with more rituals. I began waking up earlier for tahajjud, the night prayer, whispering the same verses over and over until I was numb. I read every hadith I could get my hands on, searching for a story, a clue, a formula, anything that could show me the path back to peace. I visited religious scholars in secret, asking questions disguised as curiosities so they wouldn't suspect my struggle. They praised my hunger for knowledge, unaware that it was desperation. But nothing helped. The more I searched, the more alone I felt. And with every unanswered prayer, I began to wonder if I was broken beyond repair. The worst part was that I couldn't tell anyone. Not my father, not my mother, not even my closest friends. In our world, doubts were a betrayal. Asking the wrong question could exile you from the community, or worse, from your family. So I kept it all inside. I perfected the mask. I learned to smile with conviction, to quote scripture like second nature, to speak with certainty I didn't feel. People called me an example of youthful piety. They had no idea I was collapsing. I became so skilled at pretending that even I began to believe the act. But there were moments, quiet, lonely moments, when the mask would slip, when I'd catch my reflection and not recognize the eyes staring back at me, when I'd pray and feel more like I was talking to the ceiling than to a God who cared. Everything changed the year I turned 21. I was finishing my studies and preparing for the next chapter of my life, likely to become a teacher at the local madrasa, or perhaps an imam like my father. Outwardly, my life was a success. Inwardly, I was in free fall. That's when I heard about a group from our mosque organizing a pilgrimage to Mecca, the Hajj. My heart jolted when I heard the announcement. I had dreamed of that moment since childhood, imagining the Kaaba, the white garments, the chants echoing through sacred ground. And yet, something deeper stirred in me. This time, I didn't want to go for tradition. I wanted to go for survival. I didn't voice it that way to anyone, of course. But in the quiet chambers of my heart, I whispered, "If you're real, I'll find you there." Preparing for the Hajj became my obsession. I saved every rupee I could, declined invitations to weddings, refused new clothes, fasted more days than required. My mother smiled with pride, thinking her son was becoming a saint. My father was silent, but I saw the light in his eyes. They believed I was rising. They didn't know I was drowning. For me, this was not a journey of celebration. It was a cry for rescue. Every ritual, every intention, every prayer I packed into my preparations was a silent scream. Please meet me there. Please let me feel something. I wasn't seeking answers. I wasn't even seeking paradise. I just wanted to feel seen, known, loved. When I finally boarded the plane to Saudi Arabia, my hands trembled, not from fear of travel, but from the weight of unspoken expectation. I watched others laugh and chat about the sacred sights they'd see, but I sat still, staring out the window, afraid to hope. I carried a secret so heavy it pressed against my chest with every breath. They all thought I was walking toward glory. I knew I was stumbling toward a last chance. And yet, deep down, something flickered. A fragile, reluctant hope. Maybe, just maybe, I thought, he'll speak to me there. Arriving in Mecca was overwhelming. Millions of people, all moving in rhythm, chanting the same words, dressed in the same garments. It should have made me feel connected. Instead, I felt more alone than ever. But I kept going through the motions, waiting for the moment I'd imagined my whole life, the first time I'd lay eyes on the Kaaba. As we approached, I felt my heart race. My throat tightened. Tears filled my eyes without warning. And then, there it was. Black, majestic, ancient. I raised my hands. I whispered a prayer I didn't fully understand. And as I did, I didn't hear a voice. I didn't see a vision. I felt silence. But for the first time, it wasn't empty. It was full, thick with something I couldn't name. Something that made my knees weak and my heart ache. I didn't know it yet, but everything was about to change. That night, after completing the final circuit of the tawaf, I sat on the cold marble floor of the mosque, my body trembling from exhaustion, my soul teetering on the edge of something I couldn't yet name. I closed my eyes and begged, not for forgiveness, not for blessings, but for something real, something personal. If you see me, I whispered in my heart, please show me. I didn't need a miracle. I just needed presence. And in that moment, I felt a shift, not around me, but within me. The noise of the crowd faded into a kind of quiet I had never known. It wasn't the void I was used to. It was a silence that pulsed with weight, with meaning, as though something or someone was watching, waiting. The next breath I took felt electric, like it didn't just fill my lungs but reached into the darkest parts of me. I opened my eyes slowly, and then I saw it. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, a reflection, but the glow above the Kaaba intensified. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, and still, it remained. A figure, radiant, wounded, glorious. My heart stopped. He wore a crown of thorns. His face was bloodied, yet shining with something I couldn't understand. His eyes, God, his eyes burned through me. Not with judgment, but with a kind of knowing. Like he had seen every part of me and wasn't afraid. He didn't speak with lips, but his voice thundered in my soul. Omar, why do you persecute me? I froze. Couldn't run, couldn't speak. I just stared, unraveling. I had never studied Christianity, had no idea what the gospel said, but somehow I recognized him. I knew who he was. Not from books, from something deeper. I had debated with Christians before, mocked them even. I saw their faith as misguided, even dangerous. But here he was, not in a church, not in a dream, in the holiest place I knew, and he wasn't angry. He wasn't condemning. He was there, with me, for me. That moment shattered every wall I had built around my heart. I collapsed, not from fear, from awe, from relief. The presence I'd begged for all my life had finally come, and he came with scars. I woke up in a medical tent, drenched in sweat. A nurse said I'd passed out from heat exhaustion. That made sense. It was over 40 degrees that day, but that wasn't the whole truth. Something had happened, something more real than anything I'd ever experienced. And now, it was inside me. I couldn't shake it. I tried to explain it away, to reason it out. But the image of him, the feeling of his presence, his voice, it stayed, echoed, haunted, comforted. I was changed, but I didn't know what that change meant yet. I only knew that I couldn't go back to how things were before. When I returned home, I couldn't speak of it. How could I? What would I say? I saw Jesus at the Kaaba. They'd say I was mad, or worse, possessed. So I kept silent. I resumed prayers, performed my duties, played the role. But inside, I was crumbling. Every time I bowed, I thought of him. Every time I whispered Bismillah, I heard his question again. Why do you persecute me? I wasn't a Christian. I didn't even know how to be one. I just knew that whatever had happened wasn't a hallucination. It was an invitation, and I didn't know how to respond. At night, I would lock my door, pull the curtains, and whisper the only name I remembered from that vision. Jesus. If that was you, say something again. And something did shift. Not always immediately, but gradually. I felt warmth in my chest when I spoke his name. Not just emotional warmth, but something that felt alive. I had spent my whole life believing in a God who was distant, untouchable, majestic but far. But now I was starting to believe that maybe he had come close, that maybe he wasn't waiting for me to reach him. Maybe he had already come down to find me. But the closer I felt to him, the more terrified I became. I lived in a household where Christianity wasn't just rejected, it was despised. My father had preached sermons condemning apostasy. My uncles warned us that even speaking kindly of Christians was dangerous. And here I was, hiding a secret that could destroy everything. I couldn't talk to anyone, couldn't trust anyone. I was spiritually awakening and socially suffocating. I was being split in two, the son everyone admired, and the man secretly falling in love with a presence he couldn't explain. The pressure was unbearable, and eventually someone noticed. It was my younger sister, Amina. She was 18, quiet, and far more observant than I ever gave her credit for. One night she knocked gently on my door. I hesitated but let her in. She sat on the floor, legs crossed, eyes wide with curiosity and fear. She asked me why I had been so distant, why I seemed changed. I tried to lie, said I was just tired, distracted, still processing the trip, but she tilted her head and asked, "Who is Isa?" My heart dropped. "I heard you whispering at night," she said. "You kept saying his name." I froze. For a moment I thought about denying everything, pretending, redirecting, but she had already seen too much. I begged her not to tell anyone. Her eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. For a moment, I felt relief, but it didn't last long. The next morning, my father burst into my room. No greetings, no warning, just fury. In his hand, a Quran. In his eyes, betrayal. "Did you speak the name of Jesus?" he demanded. I couldn't answer. My silence was answer enough. What followed was rage, physical, verbal, spiritual. I was dragged into the living room, my uncles summoned, my mother weeping in a corner. I tried to explain, not to convert them, just to be heard, to be understood. But they didn't hear me. They heard only threat, only shame. I told them I hadn't rejected our faith. I had simply seen something, felt something. Someone had come to me, not in anger, in love. I didn't go looking for Jesus, he found me. I couldn't unsee what I had seen. I couldn't unfeel what had awakened in me. But my words fell like stones on concrete. One uncle spit at my feet. Another called me cursed. But the worst came from my father. 3 words. Cold. Final. "You are dead." That night they locked me in my room. No food, no water, just the Quran on the floor, and the voice in my heart that wouldn't let me go. I whispered his name again. Jesus. Over and over. Through tears. Through hunger. Through fear. And something rose inside me. Not defiance. Not rebellion. Strength. Not in my body, but in my soul. I wasn't alone. Even in that darkness I felt surrounded. Not by hate, by love. A love I hadn't earned. A love I couldn't escape. 3 days later, they brought in a local sheikh, a man trained in exorcism. He believed I was possessed. He recited, poured water over me, shouted in my ears. I sat still, silent, until he cried out, "Allahu Akbar," and I whispered back, "Jesus is Lord." He grew enraged, threatened me, but I wasn't afraid anymore. Not of him, not of death, not of being cast out. I had already found the truth, and the truth had anchored me. The sheikh gave up, told my family I was lost. "Kill him or cast him out," he said. My mother begged for mercy. They chose the second option. That night, I was thrown out. No bag, no shoes, no money, just a torn shirt and bleeding feet. I wandered the streets of Lahore in silence, humiliated, broken, homeless, but not hopeless. I looked up at the night sky and whispered, "I have nothing left." And in that stillness, I heard it again, not with my ears, with my soul, a presence, a closeness, not of judgment, but of compassion. And then I saw him again, not in flames, not in majesty, but in tenderness. He knelt beside me, didn't speak, didn't preach. He cried with me. That image broke me, not because he was powerful, because he was present. The kind of love that kneels, that suffers with you, that doesn't fix you first, just stays. I whispered again, I have nothing left. And I heard in the deepest part of me, now you have me. That moment rewrote everything. I wasn't following a religion. I had found a person, the person of Jesus. The next morning, Lahore looked the same, but I was different. My stomach ached from hunger. My body was bruised and weak, but my spirit, alive. I had never felt so broken, yet so certain. I wandered aimlessly until I found a roadside tea stall. I sat in silence, trying to be invisible. But a man noticed the small cross I had tied together with 2 twigs and string, something I'd done without thinking. He asked where I got it. I hesitated. Then, for the first time, I told a part of my story. His eyes welled with tears. He leaned in and whispered, I believe too. I was stunned. For the first time since it all began, I wasn't alone. He led me to a hidden house church, a small gathering of believers who met in secret. That night, I witnessed something I had never seen before. It wasn't performance. It wasn't ritual. It was raw, unfiltered worship, flickering candles, voices trembling as they sang, open Bibles, quiet prayers, love, not the kind that seeks perfection, but the kind that meets you in your mess. I wept through the entire meeting. I didn't understand all the doctrine. I didn't know the songs, but I felt it. I recognized the same presence I had met in Mecca, the same love that sat with me in the alley. Jesus was here too. These people, many of them former Muslims like me, understood my pain. They had seen dreams, heard voices, had visions, been rejected, scarred, yet they smiled. They sang. They rejoiced. One woman had fled a death sentence. Another had watched her brother executed. And yet here they were, joyful, alive. I realized I was part of something bigger than myself. I wasn't the only one. I wasn't crazy. I was being called. I dove into the Bible with hunger. I didn't read it to perform. I read to know him. I started with the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. Every page pulsed with life. I wept as I read of Jesus healing, forgiving, embracing the forgotten. When I read the story of Saul, how he persecuted Christians before encountering Jesus, I broke. His story was mine, not in detail but in essence. Jesus didn't wait for him to get it right. He met him where he was and changed him forever, just like he had done with me. That realization sparked something new in me, boldness. I couldn't be silent forever. I had to tell someone. I had to share the love I had found, not to argue, not to convert, but to testify. Because if Jesus came for me, he could come for anyone. But with joy came risk, real risk. In our world, secret believers live in survival mode. Every step is a decision between faith and safety. One night, that risk became real. A young man in our group, Kareem, was arrested. They found a torn page of scripture in his bag. He was beaten and tortured, but never betrayed us. Still, someone else did. My sister, Amina. I don't believe she understood the cost, but her betrayal cut deeper than any blow. At 3 a.m. they came, a group of radicals, screaming, armed. They stormed the house. Chaos erupted. Candles fell. Furniture shattered. They dragged me out by the collar, fists flying, feet stomping. One of them shouted my name, Omar the Apostate. More blows came. Blood ran. Then a voice, finish him, and everything went black. I awoke in a clinic run by underground Christians. A believer had risked everything to carry me through the night. I couldn't walk for weeks. My ribs were broken, my face barely recognizable, but my spirit, unshakable. The nurse wept as I told her my story. She held my hand and asked a question that pierced my soul. Are you suffering with Christ? That phrase changed everything. I wasn't being punished. I wasn't abandoned. I was sharing in his suffering. He was there, in the punches, the betrayal, the blood. I asked the doctor if I'd recover. He smiled and said, your body will, but your heart is already stronger than most. When I could walk again, I returned to what remained of our little church. Some had fled, others went deeper underground, but a faithful few remained. They welcomed me with open arms. No judgment, no questions, just love. That day, I understood something I never had before. The church isn't a building. It's not a sermon. It's not a social event. It's a body built on sacrifice, love, and grace. And now, I was part of it. Not just as a believer, but as a brother, a witness, wounded but alive. Not because of what I had done, but because of the one who never stopped coming for me. I never expected Amina to come back, but 1 month later she did. She wore her niqab, only her eyes visible, but I recognized the tears in them. She stood in the doorway trembling. "I didn't know they would try to kill you," she whispered. "I just wanted someone to talk to you." Her voice cracked. She was a shadow of the sister I had grown up with. For a moment, I wanted to rage, to remind her of the blood, the betrayal, but something deeper rose up inside me. It wasn't justice. It was mercy. I looked into her eyes and said 3 words I never imagined I'd say: "I forgive you." She collapsed into sobs. Her body shook as she whispered, "Why would you forgive me?" I held her hands in mine and said, "Because Jesus forgave me, and he loves you too." She didn't say anything else, just turned and left. But something had shifted. A door had opened. A seed had been planted. I prayed every night for her, not out of obligation, but out of love. A month later she returned, not with accusations, but with a request. "Do you have a Bible?" My hands trembled as I handed her the one I had marked with tears and notes. She didn't need to speak. I saw it in her eyes, the hunger I once had. Jesus was calling her too. Today I live far from my hometown. A Christian family took me in. I use a different name in public. I don't attend large churches. I still carry the label apostate on my record. But behind closed doors, in secret rooms, I teach. I disciple. I translate the Bible into local dialects. I help others find what I found. Not a religion, not a doctrine, but a person. I no longer live for approval. I live for truth. The truth that found me in an alley. The truth that sat beside me on the marble floor. The truth that held my soul when my body was broken. And I'll never go back to silence. Following Jesus didn't make my life easier. In many ways, it made it harder. But it made it real. There is joy in suffering, peace in chaos, purpose in pain. I wouldn't trade what I've found for all the comfort in the world. Because when I found Christ, I found everything. My story is not unique. All over the world, people like me are having dreams, hearing voices, seeing visions. Jesus is calling the most devout, the most forgotten, the least likely. And if you're listening right now, maybe he's calling you too. I don't have all the answers. I still carry scars. I still wrestle with fear. But I have met the one who sees me, who found me, who stood between death and me. And he is worth everything. I'm not asking you to adopt a theology. I'm asking you to whisper a name, just once. Jesus. If you're real, show me. That's all it took for me. He came to me in Mecca. He'll come to you wherever you are. If you've stayed with me this far, it means something inside you is stirring. Maybe you've heard that same silence I once did. Maybe you've asked questions you were never allowed to voice. Maybe you've carried the weight of devotion without the experience of love. I want you to know, you're not alone. You're not lost. And you're not beyond reach. The same Jesus who met me in my desperation, who found me when I had nothing left, is calling your name too. Not with condemnation, with compassion, not with rules, with relationship. He doesn't demand that you clean yourself up. He just asks that you come as you are. You don't need to recite perfect prayers. You don't need to belong to a certain group or follow a script. All it takes is a whisper. Right now, in the quiet of your own heart, say his name. Jesus, if you're real, show me. That's where everything began for me. And I promise you, he will respond. Maybe not with thunder, maybe not with visions, but with presence, with peace, with the kind of love that kneels beside you when the world walks away. That's who he is. That's who he's always been. And if you feel that pull in your soul, don't ignore it. It's not weakness. It's a sacred invitation. If this testimony spoke to you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who's searching, someone who's questioning, someone who feels alone. You never know what one story, one voice, one act of courage might spark in someone else's heart. Subscribe to this channel and follow Jesus. Not because you have all the answers, but because you're ready to find the one who does. Every week we share real stories of real people who met Jesus in the most unexpected places. Stories of hope, freedom, and truth. And we want to walk with you on that same path. If you're ready to take the next step, leave a comment below that says, "I want to follow Jesus." Our community will pray for you, reach out to you, and walk with you, no matter where you are in your journey. And if you're still unsure, that's okay. Just say, "I'm searching." That's all it takes to start. No pressure, no expectations, just honesty. This isn't about converting crowds, it's about reaching hearts. And maybe, today, that heart is yours. I know what it's like to feel unseen, to be silenced, to carry your questions like a burden. But I also know what it's like to be found, to be loved in your darkest hour, to discover that the silence was never absence, but an invitation. You were created for more than rituals and rules. You were made for relationship, a real one, with the one who gave everything to reach you. Jesus sees you. Jesus knows you. And yes, Jesus loves you. Right now. Right where you are. So wherever you are, in your room, on your phone, behind your doubts, remember this. You are not alone. You are not forgotten. And you are not beyond his reach. Keep seeking. Keep asking. Keep whispering his name. Because he always comes. He came to me in Mecca. He came to me in the street. He came to me in the silence. And I know he will come to you too. Thank you for walking through this story with me, for listening not just with your ears, but with your heart. You're no longer just a viewer. You're part of something bigger now, part of a family, a movement of people who were once broken, once silenced, once rejected, but now live in truth, in freedom, and in love. Until we meet again, stay strong, stay curious, and never stop whispering his name. Jesus is near, and he is calling.